So let's review the current state of our application and decide what we will do next.
So where we left off is we're showing the thumbnail, the album art for these various albums. And when somebody clicks on an album, we want to show a window with details on the album.
Let's do it. There is a special event in our data view that we can use to handle tap event.
Yes. So if I go to the docs, let's look at data view. So all ExtReact components have a series of events that they fire. So some are life cycle events. There's a whole range of events. In this case, we want to know when somebody selects an item or taps on an item.
Child tap event looks like a good option.
Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to that event. And the way you do it, and notice the signature, by the way, the first argument is a reference to the data view itself. The second argument is, it's sort of this generic thing they call location. That's sort of a reference to the DOM element and the associated record. So location.record is the record that corresponds with that item. And that's what we want. We want the record because that corresponds to the album. So if I come over to my code, so first let's just set up that event handler. So I need a method to handle it. So I'll just call, what was the method called again? Child tap. So I'll call it onChildTap. And remember, it took two arguments. One was the data view itself. One was that thing called location. And I'd just like to log it. So once this is fired, I want to know that it's actually working. So I'll say, so location is this location object. Record is the item from the store, the record from the store. It has a property called data, and the album name is in a property called name. So that should log the name. Now we have to listen to it, and we do that up here. So all we have to do is say onChildTap. That's the name of the event. So basically the event name is camel cased, and the word on is put in front of it automatically. So the event was called child tap. That means the event we're listening to is onChildTap. So I just have to say this dot, so that's the name of our method. And then hopefully that should work. So let's try it out here. So theoretically, yeah, look at the bottom left there on the console. As I'm tapping, we're hitting our log statement. So that's great.
Cool. And now we will show dialog every time when there is a child tap event.
Right. So that's the window we want to show. And the name for that class, as Olga just said, is dialog. So let's go to the API docs for that. So here's dialog. And here's an example. So why don't I this is pretty close to what we want. I'll just copy this and paste it. So let me put it here. And then clean this up a little bit. So first, display just says true or false, whether it's visible. I'll just make it visible first, initially. This is the title. We'll have to add code to set it to the album title. This is whether closable really just shows a little X in the corner, so the user knows they can click on the X to close it. That says it can be maximized. I don't want that. Close action says what happens when the user closes it. Is it destroyed or is it just hidden? We want it hidden. We're going to reuse that window or the dialog every time a new album is chosen. This thing, mask tap handler, when the dialog is shown, it's shown as a modal dialog. And if the user were to tap somewhere off of that, this event is, this method is called. And we want that. It's natural for the user to be able to tap somewhere else and select another album, without having to click on that
and
X.
We will close our dialog at this moment, right?
Right. So actually we could put a little arrow function in here. So the dialog is passed in.
And we can call hide method, dialog.hide.
Right. So that'll just hide our dialog. We don't need that body padding. And then we want to set a height and width. And let me see here. I want my height to be pretty high, so I'll make it 400. I'll make the width, I'll make it 700. And let me think here. And then this code, oh, that's interesting. That was from their example, but it's pretty useful for us. We want to show this or not show it based on whether an album was selected. And the typical way to do that in React would be to use state.
So once the album is selected, we will call setState with our album that was selected. And once dialog will be closed, we will call setState and set album to like null or false.
Right, right. So let me go ahead and let me remove this from now. We'll need that in a minute. We also don't need these buttons. They're putting a cancel and OK button on this example that we got from the API docs. I don't care about that. So let me, and then there's some junk in the bottom there. So hopefully this will run. Let's try it out. So what we should see is the dialog, remember, because we said displayed true. So it's just sitting there. Now we want to only display it when an album is chosen. And again, we need state for that.
So we can use this on child tap event handler and do just this dot set state album and selected record.
Right, right. So up in the constructor, I've added this state and I've set album to be false. We could have set it to null. Then down below, displayed should be based on whether that album property is set, right? So basically what I want to say is, let me think here. What would be logical? I'm going to say this dot state dot album.
So once album exists, then displayed should be true. Once album is not selected, displayed should be false.
Right. So doing this little idiom here, that'll just turn it into an actual Boolean for true or false. Okay, so now let me go ahead and hit save. Album is initially false. That means when we run this thing, it should be hidden. So if we go back to our running app, it is hidden. So it's there, we're just not seeing it. So now on the child tab, now we need to update state. So as Olga said, I need to say this dot set state, and we want to set album to, well, to the record, not just the name, but we want to set it to the whole record, like that. And then when we close it, so we need an on close. Remember I had that before. So I need an on hide actually. So we're saying, hey, when this thing gets hidden, what should happen? When it's hidden, we want to update state again and set it back to null.
True, false. You forgot arrow function. You need to call it as an arrow function. Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
So let's kind of review the code. This will be true. This will be true or false depending on if somebody chose an album. When somebody taps on an album, we'll update state so that the album property is set. Therefore, this will evaluate to true and it will be displayed.
And I would suggest one short improvement. We can set title to an album name once album is selected.
So here, why don't I say this dot state dot album. So if there is an album, so I'll use a ternary operator here. So if there is an album, why don't we just use the
.data.name
and otherwise
empty
yep.
string.
Okay, so that probably works. Let's try it out. So if I select an item, oh, we got an error here. State is not a function. I must have set state. Oh, I mistyped it here. That's supposed to be set state. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, we're seeing the title. It's going away. Okay, it's working great.